Episode number 13, The Ghosts of Hollister, with Joshua Heston. Gather up the kids and the old folks, shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. Put away your pocket-sized magic lantern shows, close your eyes and listen. It's time to strike off on paths less traveled and trails so lonely. Here we experience stories from the hills and hollers, the riverbanks and the brush. It's time to venture into the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Herren. Welcome back, folks. Episode 13. I hope we're not superstitious. Not on this podcast, never. As of this recording, I'm sitting here in the dining room of the old Stonehouse stock farm, and the farm is cooler and wetter. And now we're going to start having that deep haze with these wet weekends. I really love it. I'm sitting at about 1635 in elevation, so I'm about 500 or 600 feet higher than Stratford, to give you some reference. But anyway, it's all very dreary and lovely. If you like these tales and more gritty Ozark content, be sure and hit that subscribe button and leave us a like or a comment. Let us know what you think. If you've got something to suggest, we've got a way for you to do that too. Right now, we sort of are dealing with a goblin in the works. If you've listened to the last several podcasts, we have a goblin in the works, a ghost in the works, a ghost in the machine, don't really know, a poltergeist, maybe. And what has happened is sometimes, and it seems to happen near the end, stories end up looping on one another. Thank you for those who have shouted out to us and let us know. I thought I had a really good one, and I ended up having it the other day. I was like, oh, darn. We are working on that, and we will get those up in their complete form as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for watching us grow. We really appreciate it. Another way we're growing is on socials. That would be Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us at those places. A big shout out to our new followers and friends on TikTok. You all are awesome, and I promise to have more content coming, so stay tuned. Probably by the time you get this, there'll be a lot more content up than as of the recording, but we had a little drought there. Now, the Halloween night ghost walk, sponsored by the Wild and Woolly Ozarks podcast. Yours truly in his hometown, where we can talk about, once again, the lynching of Dick Cullen. I'm thinking I may just do that one on one performance and do just around the square. Marshfield's endless cavern that's rumored to connect house to house throughout the city. Also, some maybe real ghosts. Maybe some people who haven't left yet. What about a lady who was mummified and it took 20 years to bury her? Sounds exciting. What about a tornado that wiped the whole town off the map and killed 80 or more people? So, place where a lot of things happened. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you some sites too. I'm going to show you the site of Marshfield's first courthouse that the damn Yankees burned down. And I'm going to show you just some other things that have happened over the years. So we're going to talk about the old jail, the old courthouse, different things. So be sure and join us. Oh, and I've got a site. I'm going to add something. If you've been on this before, some of this is, you're going to have some repeat. But I do have, if I can get it ready, the shootout between Colonel Paul and Marion Smith right in front of the Historical Society. So I don't know that the Historical Society will be open. I haven't even talked to them yet. So I'll be posting more on socials about this event. I probably want to do the first one about I'm thinking I want to do one at 7, but if we have a lot of response, I'm going to create an event on Facebook. So follow us over there. But so I can kind of get an idea. But go ahead and let me know. I might do one earlier, but we're going to be dealing with trick-or-treaters around the square. So I think we really need to start at 6:30 or 7 and then maybe do a second one. So anyway, that's all I have got on that. It is a good night, though, with this haze and all these storms and everything. It's a good night for ghost stories. And today's guest knows a lot about the ghosts of Hollister, Missouri, that wonderful sleepy hamlet deep in Taney County. Tonight, we're privileged to be joined by Joshua Heston. Josh is the founder and president of State of the Ozarks, and he's worked hard for many years to preserve and celebrate Ozarks culture, especially in Hollister, Missouri. While many of our tales predate, well, hold on a minute. Nope. Yep, okay, sorry. Josh is the founder also of State of the Ozarks and editor-in-chief of stateoftheozarks.net. He grew up in central Illinois with a Welsh and German hillbilly mama from rolling coal mining country in deep southern Iowa and an engineer dad from Washington, D.C. At 20, Heston had to make the choice. Choose a modern East Coast life, kind of like the Great Gatsby, I'm assuming, or allow himself to be drawn into the hillbilly mountains of the Upper South, like Jed Clampett, as so many of his ancestors had been. He chose the mountains in 2007, creating State of the Ozarks as a media platform that celebrates and preserves Ozark culture in ever-expanding ways. Josh, I'm happy to have you here. I'm always looking for someone who's in a similar mission as the rest of us. I want to welcome you to the WWO. Good evening.
Good evening, Champ. It is an honor to be here tonight.
Well, while many of our tales predate most folks now living, safe to say, because we rely heavy on a bunch of stuff that was collected upwards of a century ago, this podcast is going to be a little bit different. Josh has hunted the ghosts of Hollister himself, and has gone to great ends to document the historical aspects of the tale and a good deal of local history and lore. Josh, why don't you give us kind of an overview of the ghosts of Hollister? How many are there? There are a lot?
Oh, I think there are a lot. I would consider the Old English Inn to be one of the most haunted hotels, certainly in the Ozarks. And there's a lot of really interesting history, especially when you take into account how anachronistic downtown Hollister is, and the fact that the village itself, the town of Hollister, is comparatively new now. And of course, when you're in downtown Hollister, it looks really old, and it is on the National Historic Registry. It has been since 1978, but most of those buildings were built in the very early 20th century, and they were built with an eye to the past. But that doesn't mean that there aren't ghosts. I've had a lot of experiences down there. I had the opportunity to do a number of paranormal investigations in Hollister, and of course, I live in Hollister, so I've had the chance to be down there, down in downtown a lot.
So, unpack maybe to give us the setting, unpack the history, kind of the founding of Hollister. Hollister's in, a lot of people may not know, Hollister is in Taney County, Missouri, and it's a population of approximately, what?
Around 4,000.
Around
We have
4,000. Okay.
around 4,000, and right across the bridge from downtown Branson. So
Okay.
Hollister has been in the for the greater part of the last 60, 70 years, Hollister has been in the shadow of Branson and the shadow of the Branson Entertainment. and it goes through ebbs and flows. And I'm very excited that we're definitely flowing right now. Hollister is really coming into the local consciousness and coming into the tourism awareness. People are discovering Hollister again. Of course, we have a beautiful downtown and lots of great things to come down and see and do. But Hollister is very unique for the people who've been down here. You already know this. When you drive our old historic Downing Street, it looks like an old English village, and a lot of those buildings are 100 to 120 years old at this point.
It's a charming
And
downtown. It's really a fun place. It's just got a cool vibe. I love going to Hollister.
it does. It's such a neat feel. It's great to be down after dark. It's fun anytime, but it's great to be down after dark. And of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the Old English Inn, Ye Old English Inn. That is an anchor and a flagship business on downtown. It's impossible to miss. But it is Hollister itself is in a valley between two mountains and built right alongside Turkey Creek, which flows into the old White River, which is today the portion of the White River that it flows into is Lake Taney County. And there's a lot of crossroads, and from a superstitious standpoint, crossroads, as we know, are very important, and they hold a lot of power. And Hollister has been at a lot of crossroads for a very long time, even though as a town it was not actually established, quote unquote, established with the post office until the very late date of 1904.
Huh. So it's because Forsyth was established like before the Civil War. Galena's old. I mean, everything in there in that neighborhood is way older than it. Why did it boom so late?
Well, for a long time there was essentially nothing here, and I think it's important for people to realize that while Branson may be understood as the live entertainment capital of Missouri and has, such a big name, this particular chunk of Taney County stayed very remote for a very long period of time. It was backwoods hill country, really, until they finally brought the railroad in. And they did not start bringing the railroad in. For example, our railroad depot was opened in 1909. The railroad had come through just a couple of years before, and it really speaks to the anachronism of the Ozarks as a whole. Of course, 50, 60, 70, 80 years prior, we saw the railroads crossing the nation. But here in the Ozarks, the hills and the hollers are rugged, they're deep, and there wasn't a lot of industry. It's much easier to route the railroads around the Ozarks than it was to drive the railroads through the Ozarks. And so, whereas in comparison, you have the very early date, you have the railroads connecting St. Louis to Kansas City. Well, south of that Katy Trail, there was a lot less going on. And even further south than that, of course, you have during the Civil War, the railhead from St. Louis was in Rolla, and it wasn't until quite a bit later that you see that the railhead finally gets to Springfield, Missouri, and then it's later than that that they start bringing rail into and crossing the Ozarks, and that's when we see Hollister really begin to develop first as a mining town, then as a anticipated center of agriculture, and then in the 1920s, We see Hollister booming briefly before the Great Depression as a very old fashioned, now for us, old fashioned center for tourism.
So the mine there was mining, I assume timber too.
Yes.
Um, Maybe not to the extent that, they built railroads all through Shannon County, all these old rail lines. One of them went through my great granddaddy's farm and then took them out when they were done. I don't know how many ties they sawed and how much timber they destroyed just making the railroad, but timber wasn't worth anything, you know. But unpack the mining a little bit. What mining was there?
So what we had was a lot of mining speculation following the big mining boom in Joplin, in that tri-state
Right,
mining district of,
right.
of Joplin and Galena and Pitcher, and of course comparatively, adjusted for inflation, hundreds of millions of dollars had been made in the Joplin area. And speculators, mineralogists and speculators both understood and knew that there were zinc and lead lines running diagonally from northwest to southeast across the Ozarks, with a big center right about where Joplin is. And they knew that those lines came down through the Ozarks, down through what they were speculating to be Taney County and into Arkansas. So following Joplin, we see mining speculators, uh, land deals, lots of land speculation happening along that line. And that line crosses just south of Hollister. It crosses into the Turkey Creek watersheds. And by the 1880s, well, I take that back. In the 1890s, you saw those speculators looking and digging for zinc along Turkey Creek, which is now south of modern day Hollister, Missouri. And they did find some, but not to the level of Joplin's and or the Joplin area, the tri-state mining district. And so those mines essentially were worked, and then they petered out, but not before the community of Hollister had been established initially as a farming community and as a mining community. And that is, of course, between the late 1880s, begins with the homesteading of Melinda Fortner, who came up with her son out of Arkansas and homesteaded on what is now the confluence of Turkey Creek and then the White River. And then behind their farm, moving up Turkey Creek, the then small mining town of Hollister began.
Okay. Well, that certainly explains the growth and the population. So, what's the oldest? Let's just, I guess, do it chronologically. What's the oldest ghost story you've tracked down and hunted, and you've got maybe a little historical background on, or what?
Probably the oldest documentable ghost story would be with the Old English Inn, which was built in 1912, and it involves a little girl who is reported to haunt the inn, and it's likely this is based on some speculation, but is also based on investigations that I've conducted a couple of years ago. That she may be one of the Box children who died in 1920, March of 1920, in the tornado tragedy that destroyed the small town of Melva, which is about 2 miles south of Hollister.
So if she was killed 2 miles south, why would she haunt the inn?
And that is a question that we're working on, and this is based on research that we did, um, and an active investigation. an active investigation that we were working with EMF detectors and dealing with question answer responses. One of the things that we know is that the Old English Inn was built in the original portion was built in 1912. The second portion was built around 19, I want to say 29. But one of the long-standing stories, and we can get into this, is that the third floor is haunted by a little girl. And we were doing this investigation, and our equipment, when we began to talk about little girl, the girl, and when we began to talk about toys, when we began to talk about these things, our equipment started to light up. It started to respond. And it was one of the early investigations that I had done. And I was initially hesitant to begin this process. And before I knew it, I felt like I was having a conversation, not with a piece of equipment, but with an actual person based on the responses that I was getting. And based on my line of questioning, what we had established was that this was a spirit who was a young girl who was familiar with the hotel and had come to the hotel down Turkey Creek. And that was a chilling moment for me because the box children who died in the tornado died from drowning. They died from being thrown into the creek, which is at flood stage that March, and essentially drowning in blunt force trauma. And there was a number of people in the city, in the Hollister, when they came out to retrieve the victims. And this is, of course, it is tragic, and it still affects me emotionally. They pulled the children from the water of Turkey Creek. And of course, Turkey Creek flows directly behind the Old English Inn.
Wow. So that's something. What was what did she what was the okay, what'd she say? That's like run to what'd she say? What'd she say?
It's yeah, yeah. It's an interesting process. So for people who are not familiar, we set up EMF levels of EMF detection, and our equipment will light up
And you
at
might
various times.
you hold on just 1 second. I mean to interrupt you, but you might just EMF works off the concept that spirits have a certain amount of energy that can be in the environment. It's the same thing as a room getting cold or whatever. You can that energy is able to be detected, and in some of these things with the voices, able to. I don't understand how that works, but you can talk to spirits through them.
Right. So there are a lot of different processes for investigation. And the ones that tend to be the most reliable are temperature detection. So, for example, if an area in a room really starts to drop in temperature, there's a good chance that there's some sort of activity there. EMF stands for electromagnetic field, and there's a lot of things that create EMF. Uh, Microwaves create EMF. Electrical, any type of phone will create an EMF. So during an investigation, one of the first things that you do is that you sweep the area, and I either turn off any equipment that's going to be affecting or producing an EMF field, or you register it, you record it, so you know that, you know, if you're a little too close to a cell phone, if you're a little too close to a microwave, it's not a ghost, it's a microwave. And what we look for during an investigation is if we went through a room and there is no EMF, there's nothing setting that off, and everybody has their equipment turned off, their other equipment like their cell phones, etc., turned off, and then you start picking up EMF, then that is something that you note. And the EMF can spike through a range. And some EMF detectors just have a little dial on them. Some of them will actually light up all the way from green all the way up to red. And in this particular case, we had an EMF detector. We had several, but we had an EMF detector that could light up all the way to red. And essentially, the idea is that the spirit that we're interacting with, if you believe in such things, can, that they realize that their proximity to this equipment will cause it to go to red. And it essentially becomes a yes or no game. So it's up to the investigation team to come up with questions and see what responds. And if something responds, then you document that. And so if you ask a question and you get in an area, again, to stress this, that there are no additional EMF fields. Nobody has their cell phones on. Everything is level. And you start a line of questioning, or you start talking about something, and your EMF meters start going off. That's the idea that might register essentially a yes or a point of interest, and then you just see where the conversation goes. So that's the process. It's not a precise process, but it does give us data.
Describe a few of her responses.
What was really interesting on this whole process was there was some things that did not get any response whatsoever. Questions like, "Did you come by the train? Are you from out of town? Like a tourist or anything like that?" Those types of things did not give us any type of response until we started talking about the inn. And of course, the inn was built in 1912. It was the biggest building in town. For anyone at Melva in 1920, they would have been very familiar with the Old English Inn. It was a flagship, and it was a beautiful building. Everybody knew this building was in town. We started talking about, well, did you know about the building? Did you like it here? We started getting responses. I again, it's a little chilling, really, but I remember the moment that my fellow investigator asked, "Did you come by train?" There's nothing. And I asked, did you come down the creek? It lights up. Did you know about the inn? It lights up. Do you like the inn? It lights up. And it really felt like I was, for the first time, and this was very early on in my paranormal investigation years. It was very eerie, but it was also very beautiful because I felt like I was having a conversation with a person.
That's really interesting, Josh. Uh, you may have mentioned this and I missed it, but do you know where these children that were killed in that horrible drowning, bashing tornado were buried?
They are buried in the Branson Cemetery, the old downtown Branson Cemetery. The Box children were buried there. But one of the things that is particularly interesting, and this might come as a surprise to some people, is oftentimes cemeteries are not the location of the haunting. They are oftentimes the what appears to be the case is that hauntings can really be associated with an area that the person who passed, uh, has an emotional connection to, has a place that they liked, has a place that they feel comfortable with, has a place that was attracted to them, and that tends to draw them to that location. And in this particular case, with the haunting, we really cannot identify for sure the haunting uh, of the little girl who does haunt the Old English Inn. But we do know that the Old English Inn is haunted by a little girl. A lot of people have seen her, they've heard her. Uh, They've heard her outside their rooms. There's a lot of stories about this little girl in association with the inn.
I've just got to put in a plug for the Old English Inn because I love small businesses and I love everything about them. But the Old English Inn is truly beautiful. It's a great getaway, you know, because there's great restaurants in walking distance. The inn itself's pub. I love the Scotch eggs, and the French dip is really good there too. That's where the boys and I went. We were after fly fishing, Taney Como. We went to from where we started. It wasn't particularly convenient, but we went to the old. Always went to the Old English Inn, and we're looking forward to going back. So if I'm going to haunt someplace, you know, in the Ozarks, there could be worse places to haunt. Has
I absolutely agree.
have any guests had any experiences, or is there any kind of just lore about the place and the little girl?
There's a lot. A lot of it does center around the third floor,
Mm-hmm.
and I would also like to add to that plug of the Old English Inn. It's a beautiful hotel. It's a working hotel. It's open. You can book a room there. The rooms are beautiful. They're very well restored. One of the things I personally love about the rooms is that they didn't knock out a bunch of walls to
Mm-hmm.
make them quote unquote modern. So when you go in, they are smaller, depending on the section. There's a number of suites that are quite large, but a lot of the rooms are a little bit smaller. They are a 1920s, 1930s era size room. You still get, two beds and a nice bathroom, but they are it's not one of those hotels that you go in and you're like trying to figure out the original floor plan because the walls are all still in place. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the hotel the hotel is built like a bridge. The foundation, not just the foundations, but the physical structure and the infrastructure of the hotel is mostly steel and poured cement. Uh, and that goes all the way to the ceiling of the third floor, which is the floor of the attic, which is also very haunted. And this was in an era when there's a lot of concern about fire, and for good reason, because a lot of people lost their lives in hotels in the 19th century due to fire hazard and the building burning down. And the Old English Inn was built and billed as being fireproof because it poured cement and
Right.
steel and native stone from Turkey Creek. And so this place is built like a bridge. It's incredible.
Well,
That said,
the walls are incredibly thick. When you walk up to it, you know that you know, I don't know what could hit it to knock it out. I'd hate to. There wasn't anything of the town left if they knocked that out.
and it survived multiple floods back before they built Table Rock Lake and the Table Rock Dam in 1958-59. We have great photos of 6-8 feet of flood water in the first floor of the Old English
Right.
Inn. There's a photo of then mayor and renowned photographer Townsend Godsey in the lobby of the Old English Inn in a canoe, and it's right next to the grand staircase. And you can walk into the lobby, and the grand staircase looks exactly as it did before the flood, with this beautiful mezzanine tile. It's just an exquisite building. It's extraordinary. I mean, you do not have buildings today that you could put 6 feet of water in it and then wash the water out and have the building be structurally sound,
Yeah.
no mold, no issues whatsoever after you've power washed the mud out of the building. It's incredible. And just it's one of my favorite buildings. But coming back to our little girl, And I want to be clear, we don't know that it's one of the Box children from 1920. We believe it may be, but what we do know is that there is a little girl who haunts the third floor. And many guests have reported hearing a child running up and down the hall outside of their rooms. Uh, Things will get moved. There's two specific stories that really represent what was my introduction to the inn being truly haunted. The first one, this was not long after Janet Daly restored the inn to its full glory in the early 2000s. And there was a mother and son.
Janet Daly, the author.
Yes, Janet Daly, the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, Janet, before she passed away, purchased the inn and spent an enormous amount of money to restore the inn to its original greatness. And then they opened, and there was a mother and son, adult son, who stayed on the third floor, and they check in, they go to bed that night. They're adjacent beds, and the next morning, the mom wakes up and says, "I had the strangest dream. I dreamed there was a little girl who was standing at the end of my bed, staring at me." And the son turns white, turns to her and says, "I had the same dream."
That's wicked.
Yes, it is. It's that was my first introduction. Additionally, a good friend of mine is a man named Bruce Dees, and Bruce has been off and on until he retired. He's since moved back to Mississippi, but for many years he was the general manager of the inn. And the general manager, when they first opened, the general manager stayed, lived in the hotel and lived in a third floor suite that is it's off of the third floor for your balcony. And it is also that third floor is the only stairs access up to the attic. And Bruce has incredible stories. I have interviewed him for State of the Ozarks, and he has incredible stories, incredible ghost stories of some of his first nights and some of his living at the inn as the caretaker or the general manager. But there was one night that he was lying in bed. He wakes up and he looks over, I believe, to his right, and he said, "There's the window that overlooks Downing Street," and he sees a full body apparition of the little girl standing in front of the window, looking out over Downing Street, and then she disappears.
Wow. That's pretty wicked.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And what really what really gets me about this is these are first person. This is not like folklore from
Sure.
100 years ago. These are people I interview.
Right. Yeah, it is more modern than that's what I really one reason I wanted to bring you on because everything we've talked about ghost wise is fun as can be, but it's more it's older, it's almost removed from our current time. You know, unless you
Yeah.
happen to know where some of my things are I'm seeking, it's pretty much gone, I guess. But these are brand new, and I think that's exciting. Why don't you give us another one before we go to a commercial about the Old English Inn? Maybe a different ghost. How many ghosts do you think are there?
Oh, at least four. At
Okay.
least four. Probably quite a few more. The attic has an enormous amount of paranormal activity associated with it. But I'll tell you this story.
Why do you think
The
that would be,
hotel,
though? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why do you think the attic? You've mentioned that two or three times now.
I think there's, and I need to do more research on this, but I think there's a good evidence, the good indication that the attic was probably used as a speakeasy or something similar back during Prohibition. The attic is vast. You could pretty much play basketball up there. It has a cement floor full because of the peak of the roof. You could definitely stand up in there and and there's to me, and this is just speculation, but I would think that it's not hard to imagine that there was some illegal activity that was going on up there, and possibly some people who were less than savory doing things that they probably shouldn't be. And there's a possibility that some very bad things happened up there. Based on that, some of the darker indicators of hauntings in association with the inn are associated with the attic, and they can be very unsettling.
Do you have a particular experience you'd care to share about that, or one that another person has experienced?
I've got three. The first one is that in the late 90s, Hollister Police Department was involved in a stakeout and an observation of a business in downtown, and it involved putting a police officer in the attic because there are windows uh, in the attic that look out over both Downing Street as well as Business 65, and they were staking out a business that was over on the Business 65 side. They put an officer up there to observe, and they put him in overnight. Now, I do not have a report on what happened up there, but I do have it on very, very verifiable evidence that he was not able to stay the night. That there was enough activity that was happening in the attic that he was not able to stay. He had to leave the space and get out of there. That's number one. Number two, coming back to Bruce Dees, and this story still gets to me. They Bruce moved into his suite, his living quarters in the inn in January. This was early 2000s, in January, and nobody else was in the hotel. And he takes his clothes, he takes all of his stuff, and he's moving into this third floor suite. Now, here's the interesting thing. The third floor suite that he's moving into has a clothing closet in the bedroom. And on the back side of the clothing closet, there's a door. You open up the door, and it's the only staircase that leads up to the attic. That door is closed. He's hanging up his clothes, and something starts hitting the door from the attic, from the inside, so much so that it is shaking the door, and he is holding himself against the door. Uh, and he is the only person in the hotel. There's certainly nobody in the attic, but there's not even anybody else in the hotel or the restaurant. It is completely empty except for Bruce. Ultimately, over the course of the evening, he actually makes a flying trip to either Home Depot or Lowe's and buys locks to come back and put locks on the door because he really doesn't know what's going to come through. But it was hitting the door hard enough. There's clothes hangers, uh, hooks on the back of the door, and it was hit whatever was in the attic was hitting the door so hard that it was knocking things off of those hooks.
Wow.
The final story is a good friend of mine, longtime friend, is a sensitive. She's a medium and has been most of her life. And we were hanging out downtown. I was not doing a ghost hunt. I knew some of the stories of the Old English Inn, but I'd actually been tasked to photograph the inn for the city of Hollister. I had my camera with me, and I said, "Hey, do you want to come up to the inn? I need to take some photos." And I was just curious to see if she would pick anything up. First of all, we can get into this later. She did pick a lot of stuff up, but at the very end, we were on the third floor, and there is a crawl space access. It's a ceiling access panel that you'd have to get like step ladder and crawl up on it and push it open, and then you could get into the attic. And we're standing several rooms up, but we're standing on the third floor, and we're the only ones on the floor. And she half turns, cocks her head, at that panel, at that access point to the attic. And she turns back, she looks me dead in the eye, and she goes, "It's watching us, and we really should leave." And I went, "That works for me." And we went down to the second floor and then down to the first floor and then walked outside.
Did she have a description of what it was?
She did not. She did not. She said it was a very, other than to say it was a very heavy presence, uh, that at that moment did not want us there.
Mm.
And that was good for me. I was good with that. I was like, okay, we'll walk away now.
I think at this time I'd like to make a statement that I have no intention of spending the night on the upper floor of the Old English Inn. That's enough for me from a good distance away. Still, we'll go there and eat and maybe stay in a non-haunted room. um, but
And you can stay on the second floor just fine.
you know, yeah, that's probably what I'll have to do. But it's just really interesting how there's been a lot of people. When you think about it, there's been a lot of people pass through those walls. A lot of people, uh, all just everything that was going on. You don't know where they may have stuck if they died. And people used to die in
Agreed.
hotel rooms. If you look at the old newspapers, there's always, I mean, not weekly, but frequently you'll find that a resident of a hotel has died. So
Yes.
kind of funny. I tell you what, folks, we're gonna try something a little different here this week. We're gonna take a little break. We, meaning the Wild and Woolly Ozarks, have a sponsor. And it's a sponsor that has reached out to us and wants us to help sell some of their merchandise. So we're going to give them a try here because it is in keeping with both the theme of the podcast and the season. Troubled by witches? Fear not. The evil machinations of witches are easily warded off by mistletoe, dogwood, or a dried bat's heart. In today's busy world, it's not only hard to obtain these items, but also a lot of trouble to carry them on your person. Who has the answer? Colonel B.H. Quickfoot, of course. Get all three protections in this handy yet handsome locket in luxurious 24 gold electroplate. Dogwood, mistletoe, and a real dried bat's heart are encased in high-end luxury clear plastic. Listen to this testimonial. Granny Drager witched our cows to where they only gave bloody milk and grew wild-eyed and thin. Beset with certain financial ruin, we spent our last dollars on the three-way miracle charm amulet from Colonel B.H. Quickfoot, and miracle of miracles, we attached them to the collars that held their bells. The cows gave pailfuls of milk and returned to regular health. As for the culprit, well, old Granny Drager fell down a well and hit her head and drowned. Thank you, Colonel Quickfoot. Receive your Anti-Witch Locket today for only $17.99 or 3 easy payments of $6.66. We'll mail your amulet right now. Respond in the next 2 hours and receive a set of genuine coffin nails, a $10 value, absolutely free. Now back to the program. So, Josh, what other ghosts do you tend to have in the Hollister area? Any whether they're old or not. Give us a give us the gist of that.
Well, I think downtown Hollister has a lot of paranormal activity going on. Uh, Depending on where you're at, and I've done some investigative work, some historical work, and done some historical and paranormal tours, walking up and down the street. One of the interesting ones, and this is a lot of this type of work involves doing research and then seeing if things happen and recording that and speculating as to if it's connected, if it isn't. But if you are familiar with Downing Street, you'll probably be familiar with number one Downing Street, which is currently Kindle's Treasures. It's a big, beautiful flea market at the south end. And at various times, and when I think it was when it was first built, it was a big car dealership back when cars, the 1920s, 1930s, and you put cars inside, and it's a big stone building. It's pretty. And but before that building was built, at the corner of the building was the village blacksmith, literally. And we don't know the whys or the wherefores, uh, but fairly early on, and we're talking probably turn of the century, a man walked into the blacksmith's, walked up to the blacksmith and shot him dead, and disappeared. And we don't. It was an unsolved mystery. His widow, of course, was very upset, and we don't know what happened. But I was giving a tour and was standing in the parking lot across from that location. And there's a woman and her husband, but this woman was standing out by herself. And all of a sudden she just turns around and goes, "Who's tugging on my jacket?" And something had been tugging on her jacket uh, while I was talking. It spooked her out. We don't know, but I do know that there's an unsolved murder at that corner, and we had that paranormal experience. One interesting moment for me was I was standing, I wasn't doing a paranormal thing. I was hosting an art walk in August about 2 years ago. And I was standing in front of the Old English Inn, and all of a sudden something starts pulling the bottom of my shirt enough that I thought I had hooked it on something. And I looked down, and I'm 3, 4 inches away from anything. And but something grabbed my attention and grabbed my shirt in the process. One of the one of the bigger stories is again associated with the Old English Inn, and there's a number of hauntings up and down the street, but the Old English Inn was created by William Johnson, the Johnson family. William H. Johnson was pretty wealthy, and he was a big mover and shaker at the turn of the century, originally from Springfield, and then Forsyth, and he was the man who commissioned our beautiful 1909 railroad depot, and he was the man who built the Old English Inn. He was the man who built the bank that is right next to the Old English Inn. And he was the man who guided the look, this anachronistic look of this old English village of the Ozarks. And so he was very vested in the hotel. And then after he retired and after he died, his son took over a lot of management and moved things forward. Well, again, going back to late 90s, early 2000s, the pub was open. It was the Black Horse Pub at that time. It's now the Downing Street Poorhouse, but they were closing up for the night. They'd locked the doors. The young bartender was finishing, cleaning things up at the bar. I know you've been in there, you know the bar. And an elderly gentleman with a big black wool coat walks up and asks to talk to the manager. And the bartender is a little confused. He agrees and he goes into the back to try to find the manager. They come out and there is nobody there. And then they check the front door and they check the other door and they realize that all the doors in the hotel are locked and there's nobody else there. And the next day, they take this young bartender up across the railroad track to the old deep the across to the depot and to the caboose. And on the caboose is a portrait of William Johnson. And this young bartender recognizes the man that he was talking to the night before, who had died probably some 50 years before.
Tape recorder effect.
Possibly, and of course, the concept of an echo haunting is real. But what is interesting about this is that there was interaction, and the interaction really suggests a sentience, an awareness. There's not so much etched into the ether, but the idea that this is a spirit who has returned for a specific purpose. And some of the speculation, Mr. Johnson was very well liked, and some of the speculation is this is his hotel, and occasionally he checks back in to make sure that it's being managed properly.
Either way, though, if you own a hotel, how many times have you gone in and see something wrong? Get me the manager now.
Yes,
You know,
that is true.
I've got,
That is
particularly in a high management setting like a restaurant, a bar, a hotel. So you said there was an unsolved murder and a lady got her coat pulled. Is there any more about the unsolved murder or any weird stuff at that spot?
we don't. I don't have any more information about the murder of our blacksmith. We do have an interesting story. And you're familiar with the Downing Street Poorhouse. The Downing Street Poorhouse itself is said to be haunted by a man who was shot right outside the front windows back in the 20s.
Hmm. Any idea over what or?
Absolutely. The man was known as Popcorn. He went by the nickname Popcorn, and he had a long habit of antagonizing the town barber. Now, the barber shop at that time was located inside what is now the restaurant. And he would walk down, at least according to the stories, he would walk down the street until he got to the barber shop. And then he would spit tobacco on the barbershop window and walk on and make the barber clean it off. At one time, the barber walked out and said, Popcorn, if you do that again, I'm going to shoot you. Well, apparently the next day or the day after, he walked by and he did it again. And the barber walked out and he shot him. And he did not kill him at that time, but he did mortally wound him. And then the barber and several other people brought Popcorn into the barber shop and put him in a barber chair. And they phoned the hospital, which at that time, the closest hospital was in Springfield. This was in February, the 1920s or the early 1930s. And of course, it was winter. The weather wasn't great. The roads weren't great. And uh, the hospital said, do your best to take care of him, and we will send an ambulance, and the ambulance will be there sometime tomorrow, based on the quality of the roads. And by the time the ambulance got there, Popcorn had died.
I guess that was all there was to pop off about.
It was, and there is some speculation that Popcorn may still haunt the first floor, but we don't know that. But we do know that he died in the hotel.
Well, Josh, what else in the Hollister area do you have to entreat us with?
Well, one of my favorites. All of this is on historic Downing Street, and about midway down, uh, there is a business that's I have to double check that business has left. It's well anyway. I can walk you to it. We've had some positive turnover and a lot of new businesses have come in. But about mid street on Downing Street, there's a restaurant, and right next to it is the Green Lantern Antique Store. Green Lantern Antique Store is interesting because if you're familiar with the idea of object attachment or cursed objects, well, there was an uncountable number of objects in that antique store. And the restaurant owners late at night clean it up, and their kitchen and their sinks face the wall, and on the other side of the wall is the antique store. And the owner of the antique store, elderly man, lived in living quarters in the back of the antique store. Well, the folks in the restaurant are busy cleaning up. They're standing at their sink washing dishes, and what sounds like somebody literally took out a big cast iron skillet or a big mallet or something and hit the wall in front of them from the other side, just as hard as they possibly could. And freaks them out. They're surprised. They go out to the front, knock on the door. They think that maybe the old man in there is maybe has a problem, maybe needs some help. They try to raise somebody. They cannot. They can't. They can't get anybody. Then they go back to work and close up their restaurant. And the next day, they see the old man's son out front, and they mention this to him, and they say, "Hey, this happened. Is everybody okay?" And he kind of looks confused, and he says, "Me and my dad, we weren't there last night. There was nobody in the building." And at that time, he also shared his dad was elderly, he was ill, and this man was about my age, so he was probably in his mid 30s at the time, and he was staying in the he was living there with his dad, and there's a full living quarters in the back of this building. His dad had gone to bed. He'd been out. He comes back, checks on his dad, and then goes to bed. And he's lying in bed, and he sees a man walk past down the hallway, walk past his room. And he's like, "Dad shouldn't be up." He gets up, he checks on his dad. His dad hasn't moved. They're the only two corporeal people in there, but somebody walked by his room.
Wow. I get your attention.
It would. It would. And I was in there. I've been in that building a number of times. I was in there when it was an antique store, and it was heavy. It was very, very heavy.
Help me. Is that the one that had all the bottles in the window for
Yes,
years?
it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I've
Yep.
been in that one before. Yeah.
It is interesting to say the least. And then you come over to what is now, and I'm gonna refer back to my friend who is a medium, who picked out all of the hauntings at the Old English Inn. And then we were walking back down the street, and we get down to the south end of the street of what now is the Southern Missouri Arts Connection Gallery. And she stops at the window and she looks in, and it was not a gallery. It literally was it was a vacant building that the previous owners had just piled all their junk in. And I think this is an object attachment. Uh, but but we're standing there. This is like 9:30 at night. There's nobody else on the street. And she goes, "There is an old lady standing in the middle of that building, and she's looking at both of us. And of course, I can't see anything." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we will just move on." But I did get the chance to go into that building before they cleaned it out. And there again, the owners at that time, that it was not an open business, and they just piled mounds and mounds of stuff in there. You couldn't see from one end of the building to the other. It was a wreck. And again, I'm going to attribute that particular haunting to an object attachment. And then when they got it cleaned out, it's a very different space.
Hmm. Well, that's something. Sounds like you've got quite a concentration of them right there on Downing Street.
I think we do. I really do. And of course, there's a Also a suicide at the Old English Inn. Uh, that could be pretty creepy. There was a young man who died in the Old English Inn in the 1990s, and there's a good chance that he still haunts the third floor as well. And yeah, there's a lot to play with down there, or a lot that might play back if you go in with the wrong headspace and the wrong intent.
So you have written a bunch of these up,
Yeah,
and you have published a bunch of these under your brand State of the Ozarks.
we have.
A bunch of other just to be fair, a bunch of other supernatural fare as well, in
Yeah,
keeping with the Halloween season. Before we go, I would really like for you to briefly unpack State of the Ozarks and what you're up to and how people can
yeah.
access some more of your material, if you would, please.
I appreciate that. Of course, anybody that is interested can just go to stateoftheozarks.net, and it's all right there. But State of the Ozarks really has been a labor of love, but it's also my career and has been since 2007. Our mission of State of the Ozarks is to celebrate and preserve Ozarks culture, and that began first and foremost with our online magazine. And folks can go on that online magazine, they can scope all of it out, they can read all the articles. If there's a subject you're interested in, there's a search bar. You can type stuff in and see if we've got something on it. And dating back all the way to 2007, when I started, we of course, you have to understand. I started studying the Ozarks before social media really began to proliferate, and it was back when we had websites and email, and I'd done previous projects like this. It was always frustrating. You work really hard and you build these great articles, you write these great articles, and then you just sit there and hope that search engines would find you. And so I started State of the Ozarks Weekly, which is a free email subscription. And I write State of the Ozarks Weekly every Sunday. Every Sunday at 5 o'clock, the State of the Ozarks Weekly goes out. It includes an editorial from me. It includes a State of the Ozarks recipe, a traditional Ozarks recipe. It includes appropriate links and links to articles on the site that are either seasonally topical or letting people know what's going on. And that's one of the things, of course, for people who follow us on our social media platforms. They uh they see some of that writing that comes out, and I'm proud of that. In part because I've written a lot, and I've written so many editorials, but we have published every single week since the middle of December of 2007, and that's 931 consecutive weeks of publishing that State of the Ozarks has managed.
That in and of itself is a great accomplishment. You've been at it for about 18 years or more, and or just a shade
Yes,
for 18 years. And to write, I know how difficult it is to write, and even when you're in your groove, it can be difficult. And this the discipline there, if nothing else, this you know to go and write, whether you produce anything or not, that with that frequency is commendable, and you're
I appreciate
producing
that.
something that everybody can enjoy. You do have a for writers and artists out there. You do have a thing that happens. Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is that with our preservation and celebration of the Ozarks culture, for me, it has always been very hands-on. It's been about bringing people together, and we bring people together in a lot of different ways. We do it with our State of the Ozarks member community, which is working with our members, promoting our members, which are everything from nonprofits to entrepreneurs to small businesses to single proprietor artisans. We've created a community of people that we can support them, promote them. That's good for their businesses, and that's a lot of our business model. And then from that, we develop and curate events that physically bring people together within the community. Our longest running one has been State of the Ozarks Writers Artist Night. I know you've participated in that. Our next one actually is it's an annual event. It's coming up on November 1st, and we take regional writers. We pair them with regional artists. We ask the artist to read the original piece that the writer created, and then create original art. And then on one night of the year, we come together and we showcase and we celebrate everything that was brought together in one place. And I love it. It really speaks to the fact that for me, the Ozarks are a very current and also a very contemporary culture, and we are creating things. We're not, in so many cases, what we're creating is very important that it is informed by the past. But 50 years from now, right now is going to be the past, and I love getting the chance to create things, whether it's festivals, whether it's farmers markets, whether it's art walks, or of course Writers Artist Night, which you've been a part of.
I would just say about Writers Artist Night, I didn't get to participate other than my submission. I was at a funeral. I got hot, and then I think I got food poisoned by the buffet. So you didn't want me at Artist Night, but I wrote a tale about a character named Luther Judd I created, and Luther always had skunks under his house, and there was a piece of skunk-related artwork that I obtained. And if you're a writer and like to turn a phrase or two, now I my only bitch about the contest is it's 1,200 words, and it's very hard for me to turn the battleship around in 1,200 words, as any of our listeners can probably attest to at this point. But no, it's a good exercise. Go put down 1,200 words and for something in the Ozarks, and pay the fee so they can have a nice night and go participate. It's something that's worth doing if you're a writer, or if you're on the other end of that and you're an artist. Just be sure to reach out to Josh. I think it's a great thing you're doing. Any more on State of the Ozarks? What do you have upcoming?
Our biggest thing is that we are continuing our farmers market in the form of our food and craft market. Uh, part of this, I had no idea that tomatoes were going to figure so heavily in my career. But State of the Ozarks runs the State of the Ozarks Farmers Market. We opened that, and at the request of the city of Hollister, we opened that in 2020. I'll leave it to the imagination of the viewers, how listeners, how much fun it was to open a brand new farmers market in May of 2020. But we did, and we moved forward with that. And then this year, we partnered with one of our longest running State of the Ozarks members, which is a very community oriented small business. It's Vintage Paris Coffee, and I've worked with them for 9, 10 years at this point, and we make a lot of neat things happen. Well, this year we have moved the State of the Ozarks Farmers Market out to Vintage Paris. I have memorized the fact that we are now located at 7900 Historic Highway 165, Hollister, Missouri, right across from the Branson Scenic Overlook. And we run the market Wednesday afternoons and Saturday mornings since May. And normally we close down for the season at the end of October. This year we are going to go through all the way through November, all the way through April, with a Saturday food and craft market. I'll be at most of them, and we've got some wonderful people that we're working with them to again take the Ozarks food and Ozarks crafts, put the in front of people, and help build people's businesses, whether that's sourdough bread or local honey or handmade soap or cookies or jams. Folks can connect with that. And I love the fact that we are no longer are we just documenting Ozarks history, we are contributing to it. And of course, all that information is on www.stateoftheozarks.net.
All right. Well, I really appreciate all that. You do a lot for the Ozarks, and if we can help promote that, any events you have coming up. You can follow Josh on Facebook, and he can promote what's going on with the market, with State of the Ozarks, with all manner of things. And his non sequitur posts are often entertaining.
I do.
Occasionally they're irritating. I'll just be honest with you, but most of the time they're entertaining.
They're designed to do both.
Well, I tell you what, thank you for joining us today. If someone has a Hollister ghost story or a legend or something that if you've seen one of the ghosts at the Old English Inn, how can they get a hold of you, Josh?
Super easy. Of course, just go to stateoftheozarks.net. My contact information is all over the website. Or you can email me directly at josh@stateoftheozarks.net.
All right. Well, we do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the visit. We've enjoyed it and learned a lot more about the ghosts of Hollister. Folks, be sure to be sure to buy that extra bag of candy and maybe carve your pumpkin and get it ready and put you a bale of straw or some corn shucks out and leave the light open. I kind of some people don't like Halloween, and I have wonderful memories of Halloween, not necessarily because we got into any devilment, but because the town I grew up in, the whole town turned out, and it was a sea of children, and it was safe, and everybody could walk around, and you'd meet up with friends, and maybe you'd meet up with a bully and hit him with a stick or something that you had prepared or whatever. But it was a good, wholesome time, and so be sure to get ready for Halloween. If I see any more damn Christmas decorations, I'm going to pop. Maybe if you're out there in the Ozarks, maybe you have a local mystery, legend, or historical fact that needs investigated or plumbed. Maybe you've a wild, wild story to share. Or maybe you want to tell us something important that's going on. We would love to hear from you. You can follow us on this platform where you darn sure need to describe and hit that describe. Yeah, describe it too. Hell, I don't care. Subscribe and hit the ding-a-ling thing so you don't miss a single episode. Also, we want you to check out the content we're putting out on TikTok. It's different content from here. You can also follow that on Instagram or on Facebook. Don't forget the Ghost Walk in Marshfield, Missouri, the evening of Halloween. We're just going to be on the sidewalk, walking around. So it should be a good time. More information on that will primarily be sent out on Facebook. So if you want to attend to that, including if the weather gets bad and we have to cancel it. So we want to, would like to get several of you out and meet several of our listeners and subscribers. I know there's going to be plenty of people there I know, but I'd like to certainly meet the ones that I don't yet know. Stranger's just a friend you haven't made yet, unless he robs you. All right. If you've got any information for us or you've got an idea for a podcast, drop us a line at wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. I want to thank my guest today, Joshua Heston. I want to thank my producer, Kenneth Herren, media coordinator, Raina Barth, and right now, Klein Herren is serving as house upholsterer. Well, until next time.
Y'all be careful. And boys, if you would, please be good to the tourists.
Bye now. Thank you, folks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.